All right. I just want to take a moment to give a quick review of the ancient Egyptian pharaohs that we talked about in this chapter and kind of go over some of the accomplishments, when they ruled, and some of those things that maybe made them unique, and some of the highlights. So here we go. So just to start out, we'll talk about our timeline of the different kingdoms. So the old kingdom, known as the age of the pyramids, you see the time period that they were in. And remember, when we talk BCE, what we're talking about is the numbers kind of getting smaller as you go through, right? So just keep that in mind when you take a look at these. This is when pharaohs were building a strong central government. That means that they centralized the power of their government. And then we see that this was the main time period of the pyramid construction, hence the name Age of the Pyramids. Then we got the Middle Kingdom, also known as a period of reunification. So that means that they brought the different areas around Egypt together. And this was following a time of chaos, right, where they didn't really have a centralized government. People were kind of doing their own things, but this was the time period that they brought everybody back together. This is when we see them patronizing the arts. That means that they really promoted the arts, things like literature, right, books, art, architecture, right, the different buildings that we see. Then we've got the New Kingdoms, also known as Egypt's Golden Age. You see the time period there. And again, when they imply the Golden Age, that means that this was the height of the power of Egypt. So peace and stability, right? They weren't warring with a lot of people. And like I said before, the height of Egypt's power. Pharaoh Thutmose III expanded Egypt's empire, so they went to other areas to gain control. So some of the central information of understanding the pharaohs. Religion played a central role in ancient Egypt. Pharaohs saw themselves as gods. They would declare themselves gods, but they also had the roles of being their kings, generals, and in a lot of cases, the religious leaders as well. The Old Kingdom pharaohs, they believed in the afterlife. We see this with the different pyramids and the things that went into those pyramids. Tombs, they were built to last, right? We know that a lot of the tombs were the pyramids themselves and most definitely built to last. And then they were buried with a lot of stuff, right? So all these different things that they had, they believed they were going to be able to take them in the afterlife. Pharaohs also built a lot of monuments to glorify their power. It really showed their power, their ability to construct these large monuments. So we start to get an understanding of how the pharaohs kind of thought about themselves and what these things around them meant. So we'll talk about the pharaoh Khufu. He's known as the pyramid pharaoh. You see the picture of pyramids there. He ruled from about 2552 to 2528 BCE. Some saw him as a cruel and harsh leader, but also some saw him as a powerful but kind leader. So he was kind of controversial in that sense. He helped establish the pharaoh as the central authority, right? So that means he had all the power within the government, within his kingdom. He oversaw the food, so if you control the food, you can more or less control the people. He had a government to carry out laws, right? So we see that people worked for him in order to make sure everybody was carrying out the laws, even those that probably lived far away. He declared himself a god, so you do that, people are going to be like, oh, okay, we better listen to this guy. And one of his great things was he built the Great Pyramid of Giza. All right, there it is, the Great Pyramid, right? About 2 million stone blocks. You can see them there. People don't really know how it was put together. There's a lot of different theories out there. Tunnels they found that lead to burial chambers, right? They needed like 6 roofs were needed to hold the weight of all of this stuff. So we know that it was incredibly strong and sturdy. And it took about up to 20 years, they believe, to complete this entire structure, which when you look at it, probably that makes a lot of sense. Khufu, he had strict control of the project, so he oversaw it. He's like, I'm going to be buried here. This better do it right. And then no one knows for sure really how it's constructed, like I said before. But there are theories out there about how it may have been done. Then we've got the Pharaoh Senusret I, the patron of the arts. I talked a little bit about this earlier. They promoted the arts, right? This person ruled from 1976 to 1921 BCE. A strong leader who ruled a stable, unified Egypt. Remember the period of reunification, right? So that means things were going pretty good. They promoted art, literature, and architecture. Those types of things flourished during this time period. So the arts were promoted. People were writing stories, as well as building monuments and buildings during this time period. They mined precious metals and stones for jewelry, hence the arts. There were great works of literature like Sinuhe, the story of Sinuhe. And this was kind of this epic story about this person. And then, of course, the religious architecture, similar to things like pyramids or the White Chapel and things like that. There's a picture of the White Chapel right there, right? Somerset's greatest accomplishment, although it doesn't seem big. When you get up close to it, it's pretty impressive. Made of alabaster, right? That's a white stone that they use, and some believe that at some point it was covered in gold, so that tells you the importance of this place. Some of the carvings, right? The pharaoh with other gods, things like birds and animals and other Egyptian symbols. You can see the carvings on the front. And a later pharaoh actually took the White Chapel apart, but then we know that it was reconstructed later on. Archaeologists, they discover the broken pieces and were able to reconstruct the White Chapel. So that is really the highlight of Somerset's accomplishments. Then we've got the pharaoh Hatshepsut, promoter of Egyptian trade. She ruled from 1473 to about 1458 BCE. One of the first female pharaohs, so an incredible amount of importance there, and it tells us a lot about Egyptian culture. Art and architecture flourished during this time period, and Hatshepsut really was known for encouraging trade, right? Taking what they had to other places to get stuff that they have and trading those. Her rise in power gave her sole leadership, right? She demanded respect. She demanded that she be treated the same as male pharaohs. She even dressed like a man in order to make sure that she was able to have that respect. She had loyal advisors, right? We talk about demanding respect, dressing like a man, and belief that her father was a god. So that'll give you a lot of respect as well. She promoted trade, particularly with the kingdom of Punt, right? And that just means that they were expanding and they were doing things diplomatically. They had good relationships with the kingdoms around them. The largest expedition was to the kingdom of Punt. About 200 men, 5 ships. It was a pretty big expedition. And then, of course, another monument built her. She built the Temple of Dir-Abari, located on a cliff over the Nile River. Outside, there were a couple of obelisks, right? These tall, narrow structures, along with 200 Sphinx statues. And then inside, we see scenes from her reign, trade expedition, and the valuables that were brought back from that expedition. So when you go in there, there's carvings that tell that story. Then we've got Ramses, also known as Ramses the Great, known as a leader and planner. He ruled from 1290 to 1224 BCE, one of the longest reigns of any pharaoh, so very impressive. We get to the idea of why he was known as the Great. His military leadership, he started as a child, but was a very effective leader when it came to military. The military started very young. He was famous battle with the Hittites, one of their adversaries over in modern-day Turkey. And then after this, there was the world's first peace treaty between the Egyptians and the Hittites. So an agreement that resulted in peace between these two empires. He built numerous monuments and cities. This guy was all over the place with building monuments. Had hundreds of wives and children. So again, really was this guy that saw himself as godlike. Lots of monuments, some even upwards of 60 feet tall. So again, building a lot was going on during Ramses' time as pharaoh. One of the things that he built was the monument at Abu Simbel. It was carved along a cliff along the Nile River. We see this large statues of Ramses carved into the cliff as a testament to the Egyptian sculptures. It was a pretty big deal. These are pretty impressive things when we're talking about 60-foot tall statues. Inside, there were more statues of Ramses and other gods, right, that lined the halls as you walk into this place. And it was built to allow sunshine to illuminate the statues twice a year. So they thought about it. It was very thought out, very methodical and mathematical to make that happen. Built more monuments than any other pharaoh. and one of the best preserved bodies. When he died, they mummified his body, and when it was discovered in modern day, it was one of the best preserved bodies that they'd ever found. So that gives you an idea, a real brief summary of all the different pharaohs and some of their accomplishments. Make sure you're familiar with these. This is going to be the kind of stuff that will be tested on. So if you have questions, make sure that you ask those. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day.